Okay, well, normally I would have done this because there's an article I have to cover. I would have done it in a different setup, but my mic literally broke. So it fell over and it snapped. So unfortunately, I have to do this in this method, so I'll add in where I can. Now, there's a convention that just happened over the weekend called ScotiaCon over in Scotland, and they have a charity that's part of the event, and the charity was for the Saving Wildcats charity, and it's part of the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, is what that's part of. Now, an article came out, and the journalists in this article got the charity to remove themselves from the event, all because they have a very distasteful take on what a furry is. So, first thing here, if you have a problem with what a furry is, then you better not go to Disneyland. You better never go to another sports arena because mascots are everywhere. When it comes to a furry, they're a character. They've been created, much like what you see in front of you, a phoenix at this point. They've been created in a method to bring smiles to people. Now, the anthropomorphic side of things, yes, there are a lot of people that will sit there and create a version of it that is atomically correct. And that's a very different telling. Now, I know for myself, when it comes to stuff I grew up with, or say even Zootopia, I know there's stuff out there, I don't like that stuff. I don't look at that stuff. If it's someone's character that they've created and they've created art for themselves, that's a different story. But when I see things that I grew up with in my childhood, things that I grew up with, I want that to remain more innocent. So this article calls it a fetish. It's not a fetish at all. Being able to sit there and don something like this, put on a mask, put on a fursuit, the whole idea of it is to bring smiles. It gives a very different sense. It's no different than putting on a Spider-Man costume or a Captain America costume. It's just this is something that's a lot more enlightening and a lot more playful and fun. And every time you walk around, I don't own a fursuit. I would love to. I don't have $11,000 because they do cost up to that. I'd rather go get a car for myself, honestly, and be able to continue to work. I work for a living. I work very hard for what I do. And what I do, I work very hard to be able to continue this hobby. And that's all it is. And like I said, there are people that will sit there and make them a little bit more anatomically correct, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Hell, there's very many more shows you could go to. Namely, you go to Vegas, you walk around in Vegas, how many burlesque shows could you go to? So this article that gets put up there literally is a shame and blame of furries. It's an absolute disgrace of a journalistic attitude, and it's more on the activist side, and it pisses me off to no end. I've dealt with this for a very long time. In video games, I have seen these types of journalists before where they sit there and they post it and lop everyone into a stereotype. They talked about in this article how it's a bestiality show or how it's a creep convention. That's not what it is. That's not what it is at all. Now, bestiality, that's a level that's against the law, for one. And secondly, I can tell you right now, 99% of people, 99% of furries don't necessarily want that. There is a few that are not mature enough to handle that type of thing, and they go off the rails, and it creates a very negative space for everyone that wants to absolutely have fun in these spaces. And that is why the rules exist, because there is honestly a very, very small bunch that try to ruin it for the rest. And this is something that I have seen throughout the entire time that I've done this now in the last year. I have spoken out about cons that go off the rail, where things snowball and get out of control. These are why some of these rules exist, and why a lot of people really do frown on that type of stuff. When it comes to a anthropomorphic style character, and say you're getting a tattoo, right? It's a very adult thing to do, right? And this is one of the reasons why I do call this a very adult space. because there is a very adult style nature to it. But there is nothing wrong with it being an adult. Nothing at all. You can go to Vegas, you can go to a show. There's shows that happen here that are much more adult than anything anthropomorphic. Sure, you probably grew up on Disney. I know I did. I grew up on a lot of Disney. I grew up on the Raccoons, Canadian television cartoon about anthropomorphic raccoons doing human-like things. It's an absolute fun thing. And once again, it's a hobby. People that come together, they do these things as a hobby. Now, there is a little bit on the other side of things, but we here in town, I know we have a naughty and nice show that people can go to. You can go to it all you want. It is well attended by very, very many people that go to these shows. So it's no different than the taboo show. And that's what this article was. They're trying to make this a burning at the stake of furries. They're trying to put a stake out there in the middle, a ring of fire, and make them be burnt. This is why I bring up the fire, because this is where I step into almost every day of my life. I step in the fire, I live in it. And these types of articles that I see, where the journalist turns around, names and shames furries for something that they do, for something that they love and enjoy, for a passion of just being able to be seen and to show things off. Like, it's very fun to be able to do things like this. It is very fun. And from a gamer aspect, this is probably the highlight of gaming for me. I've gone through struggles in life. I've gone through a lot of things in life. And for me, when I stepped into this avatar, when I stepped into a scenario where I can put on this in VR, I tell you, I would love to be able to do this in real life and walk around in a fursuit. It would absolutely be amazing to do. And I have to say, it would be like donning my superhero cape at that point. You put it on and you step out in the world, and you just would see many more people have smiles on their face. Every time I've looked at someone in a fursuit, all I see is something that's smiling and happy and joyful. I don't see this whole side of things where it becomes a whole taboo. And that's what this journalist wrote. A taxpayer-funded wildcat conservation group has partnered with a furry event that caters to people with a sexual interest in animals. That's not what this is. The sexual interest in animals is definitely not what this is, and that's beyond the point. You're trying to make it out to it being those that like for the bestiality sort of thing. That's not what being a furry is. If that's what you think it is, you're wrong. There is a very high-level fantasy to this, a very high-level role-playing to this that takes it beyond than just like a tabletop game where you're rolling the dice with Dungeons and Dragons. I used to live-action role-play. This is something that's not new to me. And this is why when I step into this now, it's absolutely fantastic at that point, and I get to do something that's a little bit more and larger than life. Saving Wildcats, a partnership between the Royal Zoology Society of Scotland and SNP government agencies such as Nature Scot, have been unveiled as an official charity for ScotiaCon. So ScotiaCon is happening as I'm filming this. It's expected to attract 1,200 furries. That's not a lot over the weekend, because in my understanding, they count it per visit and not necessarily per day, because you can buy a daily ticket instead of buying for the weekend. So that's how many tickets they sell for the entire thing. Concerns have been raised owning links between furries and sinister sexual fetishes, leading campaigners to urge Saving Wildcats to cut ties with the Creep Convention. This is the actual article. This is what they wrote in the article. This is not a justifiable means of an article. This is not an objective, fact-based based article at all. This is someone's conjecture placed in behind a journalistic attitude with an activist behind it trying to get things removed. The Saving Wildcats and the Royal Zoology Society of Scotland pulled out of the event because of this article. It's absolutely ridiculous that this went to that point, and the fact that you can only say that it's a fetish straight up is absolutely, it's incorrect. That's not the purpose of it. When you step into an avatar, when you step into a fursona, you get a whole different sense of well-being. Your mental health goes into a different state, and you get to just be free. You get to walk away from the everyday life that's out there in the world. You get to forget about your worries. You get to forget that you have to humanize for your job. You get to just relax and move away from the world in that sense. Now, there is a lot of things out there. The article goes into about furries and pool toys and stuff like that as well, how it's a sexual fetish. You know what? There's probably people that do have a fetish for pool toys. But I gotta say, the panel that I went to here in Edmonton at Furry, it was nothing like that. I have video evidence that it's nothing like that. Where you walk into this panel and you have all these inflatable pool toys, and you have furries walking around in their fursuits, tossing a beach ball around, playing in an inflatable pool, just throwing these things around and just walking around and mingling and having fun. It was nothing like it's described in this article. And that's from personal experience. For myself, it has been a very eye-opening experience, one that I thoroughly enjoy. Because I have a mindset. I am a mature adult that can sit there and go through the steps of all this stuff and figure out where the lines of this is fun. When you sit there and you say, oh, it's a bestiality thing, for Christ's sakes, I'm a phoenix, I'm a mythical being. There's dragons as well. And in a lot of cases, it's a mythical, fantasy-based, role-playing, theater-style event. This has nothing to do with that. And yes, I will also put out there, yes, there is a very not safe for work side of things where a lot of people are drawn to that, because when you get into a fantasy state, your fantasy state can become much more fantasy in that sense. But it has nothing to do with bestiality. It has nothing to do with animals being harmed, because animals are not being harmed at all. Even though this article suggests that they are. Animals aren't even involved in any of these. They're humanized versions of animals at that point. They're not even animals, they're anthropomorphic. You give human traits to something to understand. It's like having the sock puppet talking to you in school when you have a problem with them and you need to talk to a counselor in school. They bring up the sock puppet and you talk to it. It's the same sort of idea as that. You put on a mask, you put on an avatar, you put on a fursona, you put on something more. If you've ever done role-playing, you put on a character and you do something more with that character, and it becomes something more meaningful and easier to talk with. You'll learn life skills from it. You'll learn leadership skills from role-playing. You learn how to deal with scenarios that are imaginary, made up, and fantasy-based. And then you get to explore things and be free. That's what it's about. It's not like this article calls it a furry fetish. They call furries a creep convention. They call them sinister sexual fantasies. It's, they talk about someone writing a erotica in a furry-based form. You have romance novels out there all the frickin' time. So now you add in a anthropomorphic furry in there, or an anthropomorphic character, and suddenly it's more taboo than anything else in the world that's been out there. They talk about furries and the sexual fetishes with pool toys and spandex, and I used to go to an emo club. I've seen it all. This is nothing new to me. And this isn't anything new to most adults in the world. Okay, so the con has a ban on bestiality, which they should. Most cons do. The con makes it 18 plus, so it's an adult environment. And they put a ban on more of the pup wear, or whatever you want to call it at this point, the more of the outlandish sort of fetish style wear that they want to name in this. I have to say, they put it out there and they say, oh, but you can do whatever you want in your own hotel room or in your own private sanctity of your own home. And that is not for me to say and judge people by. That is up to you. If you want to do things like that behind closed doors in an 18 plus zone, then that's up to you, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is not for me. That is not for this journalist. That is not for the public to say things otherwise. So this all spawned because a few of the furries that do attend this event went and did an event with the Wildlands Saving Wildcats Foundation. They did a photo shoot with them, and then this journalist from the Telegraph turned around and pretty much said, if you go to these events, you're a creep. It's not the case. I can tell you right now, furries want nothing more than just to be seen and maybe give out a few hugs and just to see people have smiles on their faces. And at the same time, maybe hand out a couple stickers. There's nothing more behind that. It's a very fun space to be able to roleplay, to be able to do a lot of things out there in the world that you don't normally do in the real world. You get to escape the real world when you step into something like this, and you get to walk away from the real world and come into a zone where you have a much better place and a much healthier state of mind, where you get to forget about things, where you get to let things go. That's the difference with it all. That is the very much difference with it all. I gotta say, this is probably the worst thing that I hate about the fandom, is the stigmatism behind it. Because journalists like this like to sit there and do clickbait articles that's going to bring it up and bring out the most negative eye that they can do. Well, I've gone to shows before. I've gone to a burlesque show, for Christ's sakes, in Vegas. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an 18 plus show. People do things behind closed doors that they want to do. So what's so taboo about it? That's not why I'm here. I'm not here for that side of things. And yeah, there is a few that do ruin it for a lot of the others. And we have seen that. Because the maturity level is just not there. I have to say, a lot of furries like to protect their animals. Right? If it wasn't for the con that I went to here, we wouldn't have the puppy that we have. Because Gears was the charity, or in the charity event. They were the ones that partnered with Furry. They raised $20,000 for Gears, and through that, we actually ended up adopting a dog. So there's a lot of good that comes from this, and it's a lot more good than there's a lot more negative. So next time you see me on the screen as a phoenix, just know I'm here. I just want to make sure that you have a good time, that maybe you can have a laugh, and maybe you can just enjoy this show. But until next time, I am your proud Canadian Phoenix, Cindershadow. I'm signing off here. Have yourselves a great day. And don't forget to like and subscribe.